Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Peyman, and we have back with us my good friend, Mr. Jason James. How's it going, Jason?
Fantastic, man. It's good to be here, my brother. This is our third one. I hope I'm leading the pack in number of appearances right now, but if not, I feel like I'm close. So
I believe you're second. Leighton Gray is one episode ahead of you.
all right, Leighton, I'm coming for you, man.
He's got competition. Jason, I wanted to jump right into it. So our conversations have been sort of fixated around immigration. I want to talk about Tommy Robinson. I don't really know much about him. I think he's got a criminal record. He's checkered past, British citizen. He came to Canada. Apparently, he lied on his immigration documents. He said he didn't have a criminal record. Goes and gives a talk, and then apparently they had undercover police officers while he's giving his presentation. At the end of it, they arrested him. I know you might not be up to speed, but like, what are your thoughts on what happened? Just based on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with some of his work, I guess. I wrote an essay about this a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not putting him in this category, but what we're seeing is kind of like a rise in agitators. And we're going to get to another agitator later in this conversation. And I don't believe that Tommy Robinson is necessarily an agitator. He's a concerned citizen who has an opinion just like the rest of us, right? But when you visit a foreign country, you have to be honest about your criminal past. Because if you're not, then you're opening yourself up for, potential harassment, right? Now, you could say, well, if he has a criminal record, what are we doing with, thousands of immigrants walking into our country with criminal records in their countries, right? Why are we letting in those other people? But the thing is that Tommy Robinson is an anti-government, anti-establishment voice. So you have to expect that they are going to do everything in their power to stop you, right? And so that's the situation. Is yes, he was arrested, and yes, for breaking the law, breaking the laws of our country, and entering and not being honest about his criminal past. My view is this: if you're going to push against the grain, make sure your slate is clean. And in saying that, I mean, be very forthcoming about who you are and where you're from and why you're here. Because you are pushing against the grain, you're swimming against the current, and they're going to do everything that they can to sweep you away. And this is just an example of that. He lied on his entry visa, and they arrested him. And I saw a video this morning that now he is stuck in Canada. They've taken his passport, and he has to stay like in southern Alberta. He can't leave. And yeah, is it just? No, not at all. I mean, what is that past criminal conviction that he has, and how does it relate to his visiting our country? I don't know if you can make a connection between the two, but he lied, and they caught him. So if you're going to be an anti-establishment voice, if you're going to swim against the current, make sure your closet is clean. And if you have things hanging around, be forthright about it. Be upfront. Say, look, this is my past. This is what I did. I'll draw a comparison here. There's a reason why Robert F. Kennedy is so popular. And a big reason for that is that he hasn't tried to obscure his history with addiction, times where he maybe spoke out of turn, said something that was incorrect, or had a position on an issue that he has since changed. And people respect that. That's respectable. People respect that honesty. And I just think that more people, if they're going to be in this space, need to conduct themselves that way. They need to be honest about who they are. I mean, it's like every day I go online and there's another, voice for the freedom movement who's like caught like trying to like, have sex with a 14-year-old girl on the internet, and it's like, okay, if that's who you are, you need to be honest about that going in, because people are going to be looking for your flaws. They're going to be looking for your weaknesses. They're going to go after you that way. And, I've been very, very, like myself, since I've entered this space and become a more public person, I've been very transparent about who I am, because I know that people are digging through my history. looking for the sore spots. So I've been very open about who I am, where I come from, and the mistakes that I've made, because I want people to know that I'm a flawed person working on being better. And so I just think, like, in this circumstance, yeah, they're obviously harassing him, and they're obviously picking on him specifically because he arrived in our country to send an anti-establishment message. But he should have made sure that his ducks were in a row before he did that.
Do you think that this guy's going to end up being a lightning rod for the anger on the right?
Of course, right? Because, what we're seeing happen on the right is the same thing we saw happen on the left, 14 years ago. The right is developing into its own cult, too. It's becoming a religion. Just look at the way that they idolize Trump. Trump was behind the first round of COVID vaccines. He still takes credit for it. Trump was behind lockdowns. That was all him. He had to sign off on that stuff. Now, I will grant him the benefit of the doubt that he really didn't know what he was doing, and he was relying on advisors in order to get through that. But at the end of the day, it's his signature on the piece of paper. But if you bring that up to people on the right at this point in time, they won't acknowledge it, or they poo-poo it, or dismiss it as if it's a non-starter. It's a lesser issue. And that's the exact thing that they do on the radical left. So what I've done is I've coined them the woke right, because that's what they are. They're woke to the other extreme. They've become a cult. And I'm running out of patience with it, because I'm firmly in the middle, and people repeatedly try to put me on their team, especially on the right. I am not on the right. I never will be. Nor will I ever be on the left ever again. I will always be in the middle, and I will always go with whatever I think is morally or ethically correct. Now, wherever that lies, on the left or the right, that's where you'll find me. But we're seeing the same cult behavior that we saw emerge on the left around 2010. And that cult behavior emerged on the right around 2020 when Trump lost.
That's a good assessment. Where I was going with that, with the lightning rod thing, I'm seeing a couple of themes. So the Conservative Party is now sort of, they've embraced the anti-immigration position. Mm-hmm. They have, I don't know if this is official, but they have that lady, Kat Canada, who's quite immigration, anti-Muslim, and she's supporting the Conservative Party. And then Ezra Levant comes out, and it does this, he loves stoking the flame, in this case with Tommy Robinson. Is this what's going to happen leading up to the next election, where the Conservatives don't want to get their hand dirty, but maybe leaning on the conservative journalism?
I wouldn't call that journalism. Those are ideologues, right? Look, I'm not a journalist. I mean, I kind of find myself here now because of my podcast and my relationship with people like Sam Cooper and Adam Zivo and others, right? I don't consider myself a journalist. However, I do my best to put my biases and my own personal beliefs behind me whenever I have conversations or I write about anything, because how my ideological allegiances, which I have very few, don't matter. What matter is the facts, what's real. Ezra Levant is an ideologue. He's not a journalist. And I don't care who hears this and gets angry at me, or who starts yelling, pejoratives at me on X over it. He's an ideologue. It's obvious, right? And Kat Canada, I don't know enough about her. I've never had any interactions with her, but I think it's great that she's at least letting her ideological allegiances show, right? By being a voice for the conservatives. If that's what she is, if she's a conservative pundit or a conservative voice, then so be it. Great. But these aren't people that you should be relying on for information, because everything that they put forth, everything that they put out there is going to be pushed through the lens of a right-wing ideology. So they're not sources of information. They're just marketers, right? And we have to understand the difference between that. And I'm actually getting kind of passionate about this issue, because I see it happening a lot on X, where people grab something that one of these ideologues puts out there and holds it up like it's, you know, the gospel. Well, it's been manipulated and stripped and warped in order to fit that box that they're trying to shove it in. And so it's not information. It's a half truth at best. And so we have to start to parse between the Sam Coopers and the Cat Canadas of the world. And Sam Cooper is a journalist. Cat Canada, I don't know enough about her. Just going off of what you said, she's a marketer. And that's the difference.
I guess I should be careful. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I'm just I'm noticing these trends.
These are things that I'm saying. Peyman, I know you're very careful with your words. I'm a lot less careful because of the things that I see. And I see people who are ideologues disguising themselves as sources of information, as being a place where you can go and get unbiased news. And I'm seeing that all over X. And it's happening a lot on the right. Because right now, of course, the right are the ones who are in direct opposition to another crazy ideology, another cult that has taken over the world. So we're in this position where the conservative voices have risen because people are looking for that opposition. They're looking for something that's pushing back against that. But what happens, and this always happens, is that when you have a radical left ideology that's in control, naturally the people who are in opposition to it get pushed to the other extreme. And now what we have is a war, a culture war between dueling cults. That's essentially what it is.
It's a good way of putting it, yeah. Before moving on, what do you think is what's the driver of these ideologues coming out? Like, do you think it's that they've gotten a taste for power? You know, they're getting a couple of impressions on Twitter and it's just, they're running wild?
I think it's money, right? Twitter has an ad share program now that I'm part of, right? I get paid every 2 weeks. It's not a lot of money. It's enough though. But the thing that I've recognized is that the more inflammatory language I use, the more engagement I receive, because people respond to content that triggers an emotion, right? And more often people respond to content that triggers the negative emotions like anger and hate, right? And so I could just sit on Twitter all day or X all day and just write inflammatory shit. It's not that hard. Right. I could just write, I hate Justin Trudeau. And here's why. Justin Trudeau's a dickhead. And, you know, he's a Chinese agent. I could write that all day, every day. Right. But what I'm trying to do is maintain some semblance of integrity. And my career as a writer and now as a podcaster is hinged on that. Because if I started to do that, then the people who really do have integrity, I'll refer to again to Sam Cooper, they'll stop talking to me. And then I'm just in the echo chamber preaching to the choir. And I don't want that. I don't want to be Ben Shapiro. And that's just, so I have to make the choice to make way less money than a lot of these grifters do, right? Because that's what they're doing. They are purposely inflaming their audience and people on the outside of that orbit to drive those ad dollars, right? Because the more engagement you have, the higher your ad share goes. So what they're trying to do is for them, I would say most of their motivation is monetary in nature, but people on the outside have been fooled into believing that these people are like actual voices for freedom. They don't care about your freedom. They don't, because if they did, they would be telling the truth. I have watched so many people in the freedom movement discredit themselves over and over and over again to a point where the real thinking people will no longer pay attention to them because it's obvious to us what's going on. And so at the end of the day, as I wrote in the essay that I wrote last week, we are giving the radicals all the ammunition they need to silence us, because there is just an infinite amount of examples provided on the internet of actual misinformation that has traveled and manipulated millions of people. So we are putting the nail in our own coffin for free speech, because their argument of yes, the right-wing, the conservative, alt-right Nazis are spreading misinformation and disinformation and malinformation and are stoking the flames of a potential revolution that's based on deceit is true. That argument is true. So we are giving them everything they need to shut us down. And it's only a matter of time. And so I hope all of those grifters out there, all of those marketers are happy with what they're doing. And I hope whatever money they're making lasts them a long time, because it's going to be over. And it's going to be because of them.
Money talks, I guess, is the conclusion of your argument.
Yeah. That's the conclusion. Yes. They are the tools of our own demise. And that's what this is. And that's it. And it sucks, man. And I honestly, I'm really, really disillusioned by it all. I actually considered shutting down my podcast last week, because I now find myself being grouped in with these people, and I am not on their side. I'm not on their team. I am as vehemently against them as I am the radical left. I despise them even more, because what they're doing is they're ruining something. They're ruining our only opportunity to get out of this for their own benefits.
Tell me this next topic I want to talk about. Tell me if it falls under the category of radical right. Ezra Levant had a truck with televisions on the side, and it was characterized as anti-Islamic. What are your thoughts on that one?
He's an agitator, right? Who would do something like that, right? I can't remember where he parked the truck, but he parked the truck somewhere significant. You're agitating. You're not sharing information. You're not giving a powerful speech that changes people's minds or opens a new perspective. You're putting a fucking billboard in the middle of the road to send a message and agitate and provoke people. And that's what Ezra Levant and Rebel News do. They're provocateurs. Now, it's not to say that they don't do some good reporting. I've actually shared a lot of the stuff that they've put out there, because some of what they do is great. It's factual. I've fact checked it myself, and it's good, right? But when you do stuff like that, again, going back to my original point, when you do stuff like that, you destroy your credibility, because thinking people see that and go, yeah, you're agitating, you're provoking, you're poking the bear. You're not giving us something that opens our eyes to a hidden truth. You're just being a dickhead. And yeah, people on the right, the extreme right, the cult members clap and cheer and go, yay, you did it, right? But what we've seen online is this sudden rise in anti-Semitism. The Jew hate is strong. And what Ezra Levant, when he does stuff like that, he's just giving ammunition to the people who want to hate Jews, because that's what they do. They go, oh, you put up a pro-Israel, anti-Muslim, billboard in a place where you knew you were going to provoke people to respond, to react. And it just gives ammunition. It just gives more ammunition to the people who want to shut him down, shut me down, and shut you down. Because they see that. And I'll go back to it. We're swimming against the current. That means we have to be clean. We have to be smart, and we have to be undeniable. And something like that, to me, it's stupid. It's childish, and he knows exactly what he's doing.
I want to come to the anti-Semitism in a moment. One thing I'd like to say, if the audience doesn't know us, we do believe that immigration it's too high, it's unsustainable. So
absolutely.
It's not like we're two pro-immigration guys, but
no, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that when you make inflammatory statements publicly without any context, what you do, you're not endearing yourself to anyone who doesn't already agree with you. Present an argument, man. Present your argument in the right way and be smart about it. It's the only way we're going to fix this. But if you just want to, put signs on a truck and drive them around a mosque or wherever he put it, you are intentionally provoking a group of people. You are doing the opposite of what you're claiming to do. You're not enlightening anyone.
Recently, I found I'm doing the one thing that I don't want to do. I'm almost becoming conspiratorial. So I look at this, and like he's like, as you said, he's intentionally agitating people. Sorry, apologies for that. He's intentionally agitating.
I got to make sure mine's off now too.
Yeah, no, I feel like an idiot.
No, please keep going. Don't cut this out. Leave it in. Yeah. Peyman, tell your producers not to cut this out. Leave it in. So
I will.
Please keep going.
So he's intentionally agitating people, and they do get agitated. You saw the response from the left. They're like, "This is hate speech," and then it's going to whip up the pro-Palestinian community. They're going to come out protesting, and then it's going to whip up the Palestine, the Israel community. And I got to ask, like who's the beneficiary here? Because Ezra Levant's not in it to help the Liberal Party. So is this the Conservative Party's thinking they'll get a couple of points out of this? Like, what's going on?
No, this is Ezra Levant pulling a stunt, driving people to Rebel News, driving eyeballs. It all boils down to money, my brother. That's all it is. It's Ezra Levant pulling a stunt that went semi-viral. Didn't go viral because nobody outside of Canada gave a fuck about it. But it's Ezra Levant pulling another stunt to draw eyeballs to Rebel News and to get those ad dollars and to get those donations and to get those subscriptions up. Because what that does for the people on the, I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't even call them pro-Israel. The people in the woke right, the right-wing cult, they go, oh boy, he got him. I'm going to give him my $3. Let's do it. And you get 1,000 of those, 10,000 of those. That's $3,000, $30,000. That stunt pays for itself. That's all it is, man. That's all it is. But in the meantime, what it does is it gives people like Justin Trudeau, the people who want to silence us and censor us and shut us down, it gives them the ability to hold that up as an example and say, look at what these people did. Look at all of the feelings that were hurt that day. And the bleeding heart liberals and the people on the center who may not have the knowledge that we have, the political perspective that we share, they go on their feelings and they go, yeah, that's a real asshole thing to do. And so they go, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be mad if they censored that. And so that gets censored, that gets shut down, that gets taken away. And it's like that. It's that snowball that rolls downhill, right? You look at what's happening with Alex Jones in the United States, what's been happening with him since the Sandy Hook thing. Alex Jones is just the first stone to fall. Once Alex Jones goes, then Joe Rogan goes, then Tucker Carlson and everyone else after. And it's the same thing here in Canada. So when I see that stunt that Ezra Levant pulled, I see somebody threatening my future as my free speech. Now, it's not to say that he shouldn't have the right to do it. You should have the right to say anything you want, wherever and whenever you want to. But you should also be smart enough to understand the consequences, especially in the environment that we're in right now. That if you are going to make that statement, add context to it and provide an undeniable argument. If you can't, then shut the fuck up.
Last question on the issue of insanity. Where is this anti-Semitism coming from? Like, everywhere I look, someone is a Zionist. And I'm like, can you define Zionist for me? And they can't.
No, because in a lot of their minds, Zionist is concurrent with Jew, right? And that's the one that really gets me, is because there's a very small percentage of Jews that would consider themselves Zionists. But Zionists are evil. They are destructive. They are power hungry. And they are unabashedly violent, but all Jews aren't Zionists. So it's just another phrase. It's another term for the day. We have this conflict in Israel that has boiled over once again. And I've had this discussion with many people, and this is the most complicated territorial dispute in human history. There is no right answer or wrong answer. Both sides are right and wrong for the same reasons. They've both committed atrocities, multiple atrocities to each other. And of course, if you're on the woke right, you take a side. And if you're on the woke left, you take a side. And if you're on the woke right, of course, you know, you're pro-Israel. Palestine should be leveled, and Israel is the Jews are the rightful descendants of the people who that land once belonged to, and that's the perspective. But you know, is Ezra Levant a Zionist? I would say look into his history, look into the people that he's connected to, and come to your own conclusions. But yeah, I mean, the rise in anti-Semitism, it's always there. There are a lot of conspiracy theories on the internet that have always existed about the amount of power that Jews have. And some of it is true. Some of it is true. But it's not because they're Jews. It's because they're evil people, you know. But they are Zionists. And we just have to, I think, be smart about the way that we approach that and separate Zionist from Jew. And once we're able to do that and kind of dissect who these Zionists are, then we see that, yeah, maybe their bloodline is the common thread that binds them together. But Zionism is a political ideology completely separate from Judaism and the Jewish people.
All right. Pivoting to...
I don't know if I answered that question, but I will say this. There has always been a lot of anti-Semitism. You know, I worked in Hollywood for years. You should hear the whispers and the things that are said behind the scenes, right? And I'm talking high-powered producers and directors who are anti-Semitic to the bone. But it's because Jews are very, very involved in Hollywood. And Hollywood a lot of it is the product of the Jewish mob. But, you know, the thing is when you spend a lot of time around people, and that group of people that you're around tend to behave in the same way, you tend to develop a prejudice against the general group overall.
No, that makes sense. I just noticed that it's like I went to bed one night, it was like 1% anti-Semitism, and I wake up the next day, it's like 25%. I'm like, what happened? Did I miss an episode?
I think what a lot of people are doing, it's the same thing that happened in Nazi Germany, right? In 1933. A lot of people are hurting really bad and they're looking for a scapegoat. And what we're seeing with the anti-Semitism in the West now is a repeat of what happened during the Weimar Republic, where there was a lot of uncertainty. People were hurting, right? Like, people don't know that Germany was in a deep, dark depression when Hitler came around. And he galvanized the country behind him, a lot of it based on anti-Semitism, because it's easier to point at another group and say they're the reason for all of our problems than to take accountability for it yourself. And we're seeing the same thing. Look at everything we've been through over the last 4 years. Look at everything we've been through over the last 15 years. It's easier to just go, yeah, the Jews did it, than for us to go, you know, maybe we all had a part in this. Maybe we let it happen, you know, and there's some really, really evil people, and we need to figure out how to deal with this and how to get out of it, you know. And it's people from everywhere and both sides of the political aisle. That's a harder problem to solve. The easier way to do it is just to go Jews, Rothschilds, right? The Jews. And that's what we're seeing a lot of people who are hurting really bad, looking for a scapegoat and a group to place that blame on. And the Jews have always been that group. They've always been that group historically.
I just can't believe how quickly everything is deteriorating.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jews are an easy target because they're generally like they're really good in business, and you know, they tend to do well economically, right? So if you're like, you know, standing in line at Walmart with a cart full of groceries you can't afford, you know, and you're about to put it on your credit card, and you know that, you know, your Jewish buddies, you know, was passed down a jewelry business. I'm being super stereotypical here, but was passed down a jewelry business from his parents, and he's doing great, and he's hired all his brothers and his cousins, and everybody who works there are Jews. you start to develop a little bit of an animus toward them. And that's what we're seeing. That's what this is.
Well, let's hope we can turn this ship around.
I hope so too.
Moving on to the next topic. A friend of mine and I, we were trying to investigate the Coots 4 incident, trying to get an understanding of what exactly happened. But I find like in the last 3 weeks, so much bad stuff has happened that case has just been buried under the news cycle. Can you give us your understanding of what happened in Coots from beginning to now?
Yeah, I have a very surface level understanding. I've spoken about this at length with people like Gord McGill and others who Gord is probably the authority on the subject. And Gord has done a lot of work on behalf of the guys and their families for $0. Look, there's a lot that has gone. I'll say this to the audience. There is a lot that has gone on behind the scenes, again, between grifters trying to use the Coots 4 for their own monetary gain and their own benefit as supposed public personalities. And Gord is the one guy who has never taken $1 for any of the work that he's done, stuck behind these guys every step of the way, written. I mean, Newsweek is the authority on this story. And the only reason Newsweek is the authority on the story is because Gord writes for Newsweek. And so anybody who's listening to or watching this, I would suggest you go and go look up Gord McGill on X, and he gives day by day updates. He's written a number of pieces for Newsweek on it. But my understanding is this, and this is a very, very basic understanding. So if people know more about this who are watching this, feel free to correct it in the comments. But you have 4 guys who were at the Coots border during the Freedom Convoy protests. They had shut down the border, and they were part of a Telegram group with an unknown person, and, you know, just kind of sending messages back and forth or whatever. And I guess maybe there were some jokes made or things that could be insinuated as being, you know, conspiratorial in nature. And then they were somehow put in contact with an undercover female police officer. And I through a series of events, they were, there was a conspiracy amongst them to kill the police officer and spark an insurrection that would travel across Canada via the Diagolon network into Ottawa, and we would have a revolution. But when you look at the evidence, it's clearly not that. It's just 4 regular guys. You know, they were completely set up with the conspiracy charge against a police officer. And the RCMP and the federal government did not have any, you know, substantial evidence against them. And it's okay, let it rock, Peyman. And they were set up. They were clearly set up. And the person who was the ringleader of the supposed Telegram group has never been investigated, has never been sought after by the RCMP. Many of the weapons, tactical vests, and things that they put on display for that picture were not the property, did not belong to any of these men. And they were used as, so there's a key moment here. And there's the moment is Chrystia Freeland writes a note to David Vigneault, supposedly, we don't know, allegedly writes a note to the head of CSIS saying, during the Freedom Convoy, saying we need to frame these people as domestic terrorists, right? And the reason why she requested that was because they needed to invoke the Emergencies Act. So this conspiracy at the Coots border to murder a police officer and spark an insurrection that, again, would travel all the way from Alberta to Ottawa via this domestic terrorist network would spark an insurrection in Ottawa and lead to a revolution. And that was the argument, and that was the precedent for invoking the Emergencies Act. So really what these guys are experiencing is they're political prisoners who are going through a kangaroo court, because basically the reason why they've been sitting in prison for so long, the 2 of them, the other 2 have been freed, is because Trudeau really needs to buy time until he's out of there before the details come out of the weeds. Because once the details come out, and the reason why this story is being buried is because there really is no evidence there. but they needed these guys in order to have the precedent to invoke the Emergencies Act. And that's basically what it is.
It's just crazy that this is my country that I'm living in. Like, the government decides, rather than, giving in to the demands of the protesters, they're going to invoke martial law, and they need a precedent for it, and they destroy the lives of 4 people. And to this day, they can't admit that, and 2 of those 4 are still in jail.
Yeah, I mean, they won't admit it because, again, they're not rational thinking people. They're puppets for ideology. They're ideologues. So if you subscribe to like radical leftism, Marxism, then deception and untruthfulness is part of it, right? Subversion and deception are like the two major pillars of Marxism. So Trudeau and the Liberals will never admit that they invoked the Emergencies Act to stop the protest. It'll always go back to Diagolong and right-wing domestic terrorist networks as they deem them. I don't believe that, but it'll always go back to that, right? Because they need that. It's their political life is kind of hanging from it. And now, as time has gone on, other things have come out, right? Like we have the NSI COP report now, which I think is damning. In any other reality that report would have come out, we would have realized how deeply embedded China is in our government and media institutions, and that would have been it. Would have been over. Parliament would have dissolved, and we would have had snap elections. But we're not there anymore because, again, we are a nation ruled by ideologues. So, yeah, it's a huge injustice. The 2 guys who have been freed, their lives are ruined. And the 2 people who are still in prison, who are going to trial, their lives are ruined too. All for, political leverage for the Trudeau Liberals. Because really what the Freedom Convoy was a gigantic humiliation and an eyesore in their mind on Canada. So they needed to end it quickly. And so this conspiracy was created. And the main thing that kind of tied it all in together was that one of the men had a tactical vest that had a Diagolong flag on it. And so that's how they made the connection to this supposed alt-right Nazi, neo-Nazi, far-right extremist network. And that sparked the whole thing. But it's the worst. If you read the case, like if you read the way Gord breaks it down, it's the worst. I mean, it's potentially the worst criminal case in Canadian history because there's zero evidence that these guys were involved in any conspiracy to do anything.
I sometimes wonder, like you're a kid, your mom and dad loves you, they pay your way through law school, you work hard, you become a judge, you want to make a difference in the world, and then you land in front of this case, and like what's going through the judge's mind? Like, he must know that this is absolutely fraudulent. So how does he justify it to himself?
Well, the thing is that a lot of judges, like I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe the judge adjudicating this case is a Liberal donor with a potential line of sight on being a Liberal candidate in the future. And that's why this judge was handed this case. It's all corrupt, right? And that's kind of the environment that we're in now in Canada. We're not in a place where you can be put in front of a judge and get a non-biased, review of the series of events and then a conclusion based upon the evidence presented. It's all everything. Our entire world is steeped in politics now. And that's, what these guys are facing. You have a Liberal judge who is closely related to the Liberals with a very strong potential for a future in politics. So if that's who's overseeing the case, then your chances at getting a fair trial are slim to none.
Last question on the trial, the Coots 4. I get the feeling that this entire conspiracy fell flat on its face. Like, they tried to make it happen, and then, like, as an outsider, I look in. The reason they invoked the Emergencies Act was because of Ottawa, not because of Coots. Did it not go as they had planned?
No, it never does because they're lying, right? When you do things under a false pretense, it doesn't go as planned, because rational people go, what are you doing? Right? Like, of course it's not going to go as planned. No, it didn't go as planned. And now in retrospect, I mean, we had that inquiry where what was it? The Emergencies Act inquiry, where at the end it was, the determination was that that the invoking the Emergencies Act was unjustified, right? That it wasn't necessary, it wasn't needed. But what does that mean anything anymore? No. We don't have the rule of law anymore in this country. We have the rule of emotion in whatever cult you're a part of. What cult are you a part of? And which is that the cult in power? Then that's the cult in power. Then you're in good standing. If not, then you're us. And if you're me, then you're double fucked, because you're in neither cult, right? But that's where we are. We don't have the rule of law. Our Bill of Rights, our Constitution means nothing. It means nothing. It's just, are you the person in charge, and do you have enough public opinion behind you to allow you to keep doing what you're doing? And in the case of the Trudeau Liberals, they don't even have public support. They just do it anyways, because really at the end of the day, who's going to stop them? We're in a junior dictatorship. This isn't democracy, man. It drives me crazy when I go online and I see people talking about democracy. Get the fuck out of here. That's been gone for a long time. We're not in a democracy anymore, and we need to stop viewing it that way, right? Look, the Conservatives had a major victory in St. Paul's, right? That's a liberal stronghold. It had been a liberal stronghold for 31 years, and the Conservatives won. That's a great sign of things to come. But the question I ask is this: when we get to a federal election, do you think that election is going to be fair and just, and the foreign influences that we have proven are involved in our country are just going to say, okay, we're going to do this one the fair way? And the other question is if the Conservatives win, who's to say that it's going to get any better? Are we just trading one cult for another? I don't know. We'll see. But the more that I see online, and the way that I see people, the mob developing around the Canadian Conservatives, and not questioning Pierre Poilievre's stance on things like central bank digital currencies, when he sat on a board for a commission that was investigating CBDCs, right? So he may say that Canada will never have a central bank digital currency, but he was involved in reviewing the potential for one, and we don't know what the conclusion of that review was. So are they just giving us enough rope to hang ourselves with? I certainly hope not, but that's a potential.
Yeah, we're living in uncertain times.
Yeah.
Jason, we're coming to the last question, and you and I talked about this. We're going to kick the hornet's nest. Tell me, what is Diagolon?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know. I can share with you what I have discovered just through my loose, listening to Jeremy McKenzie's podcast. I listened to it a couple of times, a couple episodes, and I've had some interactions with them because I made a statement on X that I thought was very, very fair, right? Which was basically me saying, I don't agree with everything Jeremy McKenzie has to say, but I do defend his right to say it. Right. I do defend his right. I defend anybody's right to say anything they want to. And I listened to, I think, 3 of his live stream episodes. And yeah, some of the stuff, the language is really inflammatory and aggressive. And it's not, if you're listening to his podcast, you're not getting like critical breakdowns of political policy, right? It's a long stream of consciousness rant from a guy who's clearly, look, he's a former special forces guy, he's former military, right? He has a leg to stand on. His perspective is valid. The problem, I think, is at times he just kind of says things that are really, over the top and do straddle the line of racism and prejudice. And I don't think he would disagree with me saying that. But he has a valid perspective and a valid opinion. And if you don't want to listen to it, turn it off. But in terms of what Diagolon is, I don't know. It seems to me to kind of resemble, say, like, the what was Gavin McInnes's group in the US, the Proud Boys, right? It seems to kind of resemble that a little bit, where it's like a loosely connected group of like-minded individuals who have very strong opinions on politics and the social condition. And yeah, if you wanted to draw the line between their thinking and like historical extreme right-wing ideology, it would be a very squiggly line. You know, it's not a straight line, but I could see how some people would make those connections. But again, look, the thing that we have to remember is that we are in a state of turmoil in our country, in the West in general, but specifically in Canada, because we're at ground zero of this, you know, fascist experiment that's taking over the world. And different people react to it in different ways. And so I don't condemn any of the people involved in that group for any of the perspectives that they share, because it's coming from the same place that you and I are coming from, right? We're all afraid and angry and nervous and anxious at the same time. All of us are. And what we're watching is just the way that people are processing it and dealing with it. And so my view on Diagolon is that they are not an alt-right neo-Nazi terror, domestic terror network. They're not this extremist threat that Trudeau tries to make them out to be, right? They're just a group of people who found each other amongst all this chaos and see things along the same line. However, I will say this: when those groups get together, they have a tendency to become extreme over time, right? Because it's an echo chamber and they all kind of escalate together. And that's the danger, I think. I think the danger is just that, and this is true for any group, not just these Diagolon guys. It's true for any political group, any group any group that forms in resistance to the power structures around them, is that they do have a tendency to escalate. They do have a tendency to kind of become more extreme over time. And so I don't know enough to really comment on whether or not that's happening, but I would say, you know, Jeremy Mackenzie, I just hope that, you know, he has his thumb on it and he has a handle on it. I don't know him personally, but you know, that's my hope, because, you know, at the end of the day, man, we all got to find like-minded people. We all got to find our group. And, you know, these people seem to have found each other. And I don't agree with some or a lot of what they have to say, but as long as they're not hurting anybody, then they should be free to say it.
Well put. I have no input. I have no idea what the hell Diagolon is.
Hey, man, don't abandon me now. You don't want the mean tweets. I'm going to get all the angry posts. Peyman,
I 100% support them, yeah.
You know what you did to me? The ship was sinking, and I was like, we're going down with the ship. And in the last second, right as the bow was about to go under, you're like, all right, see ya.
I jumped into the life raft. Yeah. Totally.
It's all good, man. I still love you, brother.
I don't really know anything, but I'll say this. It's really funny. I talk to people on the left, and all of these, everything I know about these like extreme groups on the right, I know from the left. They're like, "Oh, did you hear what Diagolon did?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't want to know. I don't care." And then like everything I know about QAnon is from people from the left telling me, and I'm like, I don't want to know.
Yeah, but that's the problem, right? The problem is that the people who are talking about it are the people who want to paint them out to be racists and Nazis, and that was the same experience I had, right? Because I'm not in those groups. I don't operate in those circles. And so I was hearing, it was Trudeau who was like, every second word was Diagolon and right-wing extremists and neo-Nazis. And so I was like, okay, I don't know enough about these guys, so I'm going to go and I'll listen to Jeremy Mackenzie's live stream and kind of get an idea of what they're about. And, he strikes me as a passionate, very smart guy who is just fed up like the rest of us are. And the way his message comes out is just in long stream of consciousness rants that tend to lead him into areas where yeah, I don't agree with what he has to say. I'd say I think some of his statements are really brash, and like I said, do straddle the line of some, some dangerous racist and prejudiced concepts. But he's a guy who's watching his country fall apart and who's watching immigrants flow into it, and watching a collapse develop that seems to be orchestrated and on purpose. And immigration is a part of that, is a key component. And so, we're all dealing with this in the way that they can. And in the way that we're all dealing with this as best as we can in the way that we deal with things. And, for me, the approach has always to be, considerate and cautious and measured, but it's not that way for other people. And, I don't blame them. Emotions are high. And look, where we are in this country, we are on the brink of a revolution. The spark is going to be lit sooner or later. I mean, we can't go on like this forever. So I don't know. I mean, I look at what they do and I look at what they have to say. And like I said, I kicked that hornet's nest a while ago, and I had interactions with a couple of the people from that network, from that group. And, I get where they're coming from. I understand their anger. Do I wish that it was articulated differently? Yeah. But do I want everybody to be like me? No. So I just hope that within their group that they have the sense to kind of understand where the threshold is and not cross it.
Well, Jason, I know you got to get going. I put a target on our backs this time, so I won't ask for your social media details.
No, I'll give it to you. It's okay. It's okay. I've already kicked that hornet's nest before. If people want to follow me, Jason James BNN on X, or just follow me at bravenewnormal.substack.com.
Fantastic, Jason. Thank you very much for coming on.
Peyman, always a pleasure. I'm sorry I had to keep this one short. The next one, when I would do my fourth and I break that streak and I tie Leighton, we'll make that next one longer.
All right, we'll get you back on. Take care, buddy.
Cool. Thanks, brother.